Coming up on Bruce Lee Lives. He threw down in his movies.
You wanted to be able to do that.
And battled on the streets of Hong Kong.
Growing up in a rough area where he had to defend himself.
He fought Chinese traditionalists.
He defied the Chinese martial arts community.
Injuries.
You gotta overcome injuries.
And the Hollywood system.
I even think of him as like a hustler.
Bruce Lee's spirit is alive today as others fight for their goals.
This is a guy, he went out and did it. There were no limits.
And overcome obstacles.
Everybody has an obstacle they have to overcome.
It's Bruce Lee, the fighter, on Bruce Lee Lives.
Ryan, when you hear the name Bruce Lee, like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
When I hear the name Bruce Lee, the first thing that comes to my mind is the poster that hung on my wall when I was about 8 years old.
Dynamic hero, action fighter dude. Just an iconic figure.
Whenever he's on screen, you kind of can't take your eyes off him.
Someone that made martial art more than what it was.
Mayhem Miller. Well, when you first say the name Bruce Lee, it conjures up a million images of fancy kicks and the classic singing sounds. Whoa! Man, Bruce Lee has had an impact on every martial artist or every moviegoer for the past 30 years.
Bruce Lee. He single-handedly changed movies and martial arts forever and remains an enduring icon today.
You'd have to find someone almost brain dead who doesn't know who he is.
Now, Bruce Lee lives in the series that celebrates the life and legacy of the greatest martial artist of all time. On this episode, we take on Bruce Lee, the fighter.
You want to fight? I'll take you on.
Throughout his life, Bruce Lee faced many foes, from individuals to cultural conventions to racism and the Hollywood system. And today, his spirit inspires others to fight their own battles.
From where I came from the streets, being around gangs, being around bad things I shouldn't have been at a young age. And where I grew up to now is being an inspiration.
To many, Bruce Lee the fighter is the man from his movies.
Bruce Lee was one badass.
There's something about being one guy and being able to just kick the crap out of like 30 people.
You wanted to be able to do that. You wanted to be able to fight and like feel no pain.
Even if he's not talking, it's just the intensity in his eyes. There was electricity flowing through that man.
In his films, he never backed down from a fight, whether facing street gangs, karate champions, or even NBA superstars.
He's somebody that was 135 pounds and could beat anybody up.
Here's a guy, little guy, who's beating guys that are like 10 times his size.
Tiny little guy. But those are the ones to watch because they pack the most punch. Because you never see them coming.
But Bruce Lee wasn't just a fighter on screen. He was a fighter in life. And his lessons apply universally. Whether you're in a cage,
to fight is to compete. We're all born to fight.
Or any other field.
Skateboarding was so freestyle. It's like fighting. It's about competing with other people.
In motocross, it's a battle. You against another guy on a level playing field.
Stand-up comedy is a battle. Every time I do a show, I go in it like it's a fight.
Bruce Lee's actual fighting began on the streets of Hong Kong. While growing up, he found himself in numerous street fights.
Growing up in a rough area where he had to defend himself. I believe that was the impetus for his beginnings in martial arts.
Fearing for his safety, Lee's parents enrolled him in martial arts classes at the age of 13, where under legendary Wing Chun Sifu Yip Man, Bruce Lee studied Kung Fu, taking to the style like a natural. But Lee was always a street fighter at his core, a trait that would in part define his life.
He was the one who really said, you know what, one martial art style is not going to cover you in street fighting.
Survival is different. You don't know the caliber of your opponent. And then you have implements, beer bottle, knife, club, that changes the routine.
So you have to be prepared for anything and everything that combat brings.
To Lee, overcoming any opponent or any obstacle called for many tools in your toolbox.
Okay. There are various kinds of strikes. It depends on where you hit, then what weapon you will be using. There is the finger jab, there is the punch, there is the back fist, and then low. Of course, then they use leg, straight at the groin, or come up.
And winning always came to the most prepared.
I fear not the man.
I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once.
10,000 kicks once.
But I fear the man.
But I fear the man.
Who's practiced one kick.
One kick.
One kick.
One kick 10,000 times.
Bruce Lee felt that practice truly did make perfect. A concept shared by many top artists and competitors today.
Doing something so many times, repeating it, puts it in your mind to where it comes second nature.
So that it becomes a reflex rather than having to think about doing something.
And your body reacts by itself. So you don't even got to think. Your body just reacts.
You want to be better than Stevie Ray Vaughan? You gotta practice your ass. You want to be better than Bruce Lee? You gotta practice your ass.
While Bruce Lee's theories on fighting can be applied universally, nowhere are they more evident than in the world of mixed martial arts.
I would actually say Bruce Lee's the creator of mixed martial arts, without a doubt.
Bruce Lee was like one of those starting points for all of us. For us to ignore his contributions would just be silly.
Kenny Florian, a top-ranked UFC fighter, is a huge Bruce Lee fan.
Check, check, check. I don't know how many mixed martial arts fighters are as influenced as Bruce Lee as I am. I grew up watching his movies.
When Florian prepares for a fight, Bruce Lee is as much a coach as an inspiration.
Bruce Lee was really a visionary in that he knew that fighting, true fighting, is fluid. It changes in an instant, and you need to have moves that will work in an instant. A fight should always be based on muscle memory. You know, Bruce Lee used to talk about that.
Oh, jump it, jump it, jump it!
He knew way back then that you need to be extremely fast, you need to be extremely strong. I have a strength and conditioning coach that I work with so I can be the best possible fighter, because a Ferrari with no gas doesn't go anywhere. I've been training for months. You know, I feel like I'm ready.
Coming up, Kenny puts Bruce Lee's principles to the test in the octagon. But first, Bruce Lee must fight Chinese purists and the Hollywood system.
Bruce Lee was challenged many times to fights because people didn't like the fact that this little guy was going against tradition.
Bruce Lee didn't just fight with his feet and fists. He was someone who set goals and fought to get what he wanted.
Bruce was the type of an individual that if he told you he was going to do something, he did it.
A recurring opponent was the status quo. After moving to the U.S., Lee began teaching Junfan Kung Fu, meaning Bruce Lee's Kung Fu. He taught all races and creeds, defying traditionalists who staunchly believed it shouldn't be taught to non-Chinese.
Of course, he was teaching people outside the Chinese community. My gosh, I mean, he was mixing it up with whites and blacks and Hispanics and other Asian groups, God forbid.
He defied the Chinese martial arts community. This was so against tradition, so against thousands of years.
Lee would go on to challenge traditional martial artists again, as he blended numerous styles together and rejected any element he considered useless.
I don't believe in system, Mr. Longstreet, nor in method.
That's going to throw some salt in some of these grandmasters' games. This is going to make a lot of people mad about what this young Asian guy's doing.
The wonderful thing about my godfather is he wasn't afraid to go against the grain.
It pissed a lot of people off by that. A lot of people hate things that go against the average thinking, because one thing that we do as humans, we try to group everything together.
Lee's revolutionary spirit inspires many top athletes and entertainers today.
I see a very similar parallel between his opposition or going against the tide, going against the grain of culture of the martial arts scene, because we, as a skateboard culture, we had to go against the tide of what people said we were, and went from backyard swimming pools to stadiums. And it all started with us having a dream and not allowing anything to get in the way of that.
Bruce Lee was challenged many times to fights because people didn't like the fact that this little guy was going against tradition. And like myself, it's probably why a lot of magicians that are not professionals hate me, because of my success and because I threw the tuxedo and the rabbit coming out of the hat and threw it in the garbage. But I think if you're true to yourself, you're passionate about what you want out of life, you just do your thing and never look over your shoulder. And Bruce Lee did that.
While Bruce Lee always fought for his beliefs, the path wasn't painless.
A lot of people were going against Bruce Lee. The industry.
Nobody wants to invest money in a relatively new Chinese actor.
His own people, people with money.
But to Bruce, it wasn't about the obstacle. It was about how you dealt with it.
Well, we fight alone or all together.
The hell with circumstances.
To hell with circumstances.
I create opportunities.
Through his life, Bruce Lee faced numerous hurdles, but always looked adversity in the eyes and stared it down.
His whole thing was problem solving. He says, life is problem solving.
Bruce Lee saw an obstacle and he's like, okay, I'm gonna get around this thing.
In 1970, while weightlifting, Bruce Lee severely injured his back. He was bedridden for months. The doctors said he'd never practice martial arts again. He used the time to write his seminal book, a philosophical treatise on fighting called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
If your back is crushed and you have to be hospitalized or immobilized from the back injury, many people would just be depressed and go, life sucks. Or some people write The Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
That's a mindset. He willed himself to come back strong. And not only just beat expectation, but just exceed it by miles.
I think the one thing you take is that this is all mental. There's such a mental aspect to all the martial arts and even living life.
Few action sports stars are bigger fans of Bruce Lee than Metal Militia rider Ronnie Feist.
He just had a really impact. I honestly thought I was Bruce Lee at one point. Like, I really wanted to be Bruce Lee really bad as a kid. So I would literally dress like him and eat my food with chopsticks. And my dad's just like, this kid's lost his mind, dude. I mean, I ended up getting a tattoo of him just out of, like, respect, you know? I don't know, I love Bruce.
Like Bruce Lee, Ronnie has faced serious injuries that should have ended his career, including his most recent.
All right, so 2 weeks left on the Nuclear Cowboy Tour, I crashed in Ontario. I caught the wall with my left femur, broke my femur. Got surgery the next night, got a rod put in, 2 screws. Bruce has been through major injuries that set him back, and this femur fracture has definitely been a setback. That's how weak it is. Can't even lift it up. I'm pushing to be back in 3 months, and I think the same thing with Bruce. If he gets hurt, it's a love for the martial arts. He's an athlete. I think when you put your mind to something and you believe it, ain't nobody stop me. I'm gonna ride X Games. So that's how I look at it. That's what I think set Bruce apart. He had love and passion for what he did, and he had a desire to be the best that he can be. You know, throughout the career, I've had injuries, and, you know, you're faced with injuries, and you always got to overcome injury.
There's 6 weeks until Summer X Games, and Ronnie is finally back in the saddle for the first time in months.
I guess I just gotta start somewhere, right? I think I'm gonna be a lot better off at X Games than people are gonna expect. I think I might even surprise myself.
I would hope Bruce is watching down, looking over. I would hope that he would be like, you know, well done, you know?
Ronnie knows the will to fight through injury has its rewards, just like with Bruce Lee. When Bruce's back was injured, they said he may never walk again. And then he went on to make the greatest martial arts movies of all time. The Big Boss, Fists of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon, Game of Death. Next, Hollywood keeps Bruce from being a leading man, so he does it on his own.
He knew that, hey, if I can't get the studios behind me in Hollywood, then I really have to make my own path here.
Plus, UFC star Kenny Florian is ready for a fight.
I can't wait to get in there, and it's been a lot of pain and suffering. Now it's about putting that on my opponent.
Bruce Lee was a man who was used to winning his battles. But in his fight to be a Hollywood star, he faced his fair share of hurdles. But even to someone as determined as Bruce Lee, the Hollywood system was a formidable foe.
You got to think of the racism that he faced back at that time, where at that time not too many people have seen an Asian guy on a TV show where he's like the star.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee.
Sure, in 1966, he won the right to play a television sidekick in The Green Hornet and got other small roles in films and TV. But Lee believed he had the chops to be a leading man and wasn't getting the offers.
I think about what my godfather went through back then because Hollywood kept telling him, you know what, we just don't think the world is ready to accept somebody who's an Oriental. I mean, he saw it left and right.
The last straw came when he helped develop the TV show Kung Fu, then watched as the network gave the leading role to a Caucasian, David Carradine.
Kung Fu, yeah. He had helped come up with the premise for it. And then all of a sudden, to have that project pulled away from you because of the way you look. Come on.
Because if you're an investor in that picture, he understood that. But then he felt frustrated at that time period.
But in true Bruce Lee fashion, he fought through every roadblock, one way or another.
My father and my mother always tell me the story is they said, what are you going to do, Bruce? And he goes, circumstances, hell, I make circumstances. And so thus he went on to Hong Kong and he got together his own team and his own group and he made his own projects.
That's why he went back to Hong Kong. I remember when he was going back, he said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do pictures and I'm going to direct and I'm going to learn how to cinematography. I'm going to learn how to even write a script. And I thought, my gosh, he's a martial artist. But I think he proved a lot of people wrong.
When his Hong Kong films broke box office records, Hollywood finally took notice. Bruce Lee fought to be a movie star, and he did it his way.
I also see him as one of the original fathers of independent filmmaking. I really do. Because, he knew that, hey, if I can't get the studios behind me in Hollywood, then I really have to make my own path here. And I love how he really took control of his destiny in his own life.
I even think of him as like a hustler, you know what I'm saying? Like, he had to pave his own way to break into mainstream cultures. I remember he didn't want to be just like the sidekick, because he knew he was more than that.
This is a guy, he went out and did it. There were no limits. He was a true rebel and a successful one.
Seeing no limits is the true fighter's way, something UFC star Kenny Florian knows all too well. He just lost nearly 20 pounds to compete as a featherweight. And if he can win his fight against top 5 fighter Diego Nunes, he just might get a shot at the title.
It's been a lot of pain and suffering. It's very much in line with what Bruce Lee used to talk about, is pushing beyond your limits. And when you think you've done that, push even more.
It's fight night, and Kenny Florian just hopes he's got more Bruce Lee in him than his opponent. In 3 full rounds, Florian and Nunes battle furiously. A skilled elbow by Florian draws blood, helping Kenny earn victory by unanimous decision.
I felt great out there during the fight. I felt really good. I got stronger as the fight went on.
What do you think Bruce would say?
It would be get back to work. That's what I'm going to do.
Bruce Lee, he went and wanted to achieve what he wanted to do and attacked it with vigor and passion, and that's the way that I've tried to approach my life, and I think everybody should approach your life that way.
Like Bruce Lee, Kenny was steadfast in achieving his goals and won't stop till he gets his title. And it's not just fighters who can use Lee for inspiration. Whether they're proving people wrong.
There's been a lot of things in my life that people say, oh, you can't do that, or there's no way you're going to be able to pull this off. And it makes me want to do it that much more.
Or overcoming hardships.
I believe I have a similar path in where I've had adversity. I was on drugs for 10 years. I went to prison for 5. And through that adversity, I've come out learning something from it and really applying it to my life in such a way that I could really influence others.
That's the cool thing I think that my godfather was able to offer people from different sports, is just how to rethink the game, how to think outside the box, how to be an explorer.
Bruce Lee overcame a lot of obstacles. Everybody has an obstacle they have to overcome.
Bruce Lee epitomized what it was to be a fighter.
There's a Bruce Lee in you, there's a Bruce Lee in me. And what does that mean? It means that you're a warrior. You shouldn't put the tail between your legs and apologize for being a human being.
If you understand fighting, you understand life.
That influences all of us because every single day of our lives, we're dealing with obstacles in front of us, whether it's our job or home life. And I think when you think of Bruce Lee, it's like, well, I'm just going to do what Bruce Lee says, and I'm going to excel and be victorious in a sense.
The fight endures, and so Bruce Lee lives.